Go. So, friends, welcome. My name is Ranjit Anipu. I'm joining in from New York. I'm a co-founder of BWasteWise. BWasteWise is your knowledge partner for the resource revolution. Because if you're someone who's looking for solutions and knowledge, you can learn from hundreds of experts on our website. We've recorded easily engaging face-to-face conversations with some of the best minds in circular economy and resources and waste management, where they not only discussed the most pressing issues of our time, but they also shared their invaluable expertise. We've also recorded many training sessions, all of which are available online for free. You can just go to the website, www.wastewise.be. Now, if you're someone with expertise who can help others find solutions, you can use our platform to reach a large and ever-growing audience. For example, this interview got about 250 registrations, and this is only the first interview in our partnership with ISWA to make knowledge more accessible to a global audience by leveraging ISWA's strong network, expertise, and our model. This video will be watched by many people live. It'll also be watched as a replay when it's recorded and published. And it'll also be watched through the articles that will be written about it and the short video excerpts that will be made based on this video. So before we begin, I would like to thank Antonis, because this partnership would not have been possible without his visionary leadership. Now, Antonis and I have known each other for over 6 years now. And throughout my work in the US, Africa, Middle East, and Asia, and his work worldwide, we have seen that there is no global community for resources and waste management, because we are extremely fragmented regionally, sectorally, and ideologically. Now, we began this partnership because we understand that there are billions of decision makers looking for solutions worldwide, but there are only a few tens of thousands who practice, study, and can provide those solutions or guide towards them. Now, we also began this partnership because we understand the need for sharing knowledge and the need for creating an engaged global community. The engaged global community is required for us to be able to scale solutions, because the challenges that we face are really large, but the solutions are all local. And we understand that we don't have to agree with everyone on everything, so as to be able to just help each other out or to find common ground and to leverage each other's capabilities. And we also understand that without knowledge sharing and collaboration, each one of us is weaker, has a smaller voice, and is less equipped to deal with today's complex challenges. Finally, a significant part of today's knowledge dissemination is video, and this is happening in all sectors. And this trend will only increase rapidly. So as we speak, BWasteWise is partnering with the Asian Development Bank and WasteAid UK to build on this partnership with ISWA. So thank you again, my friend, and welcome to BWasteWise. Antonis, warm welcome to you to BWasteWise.
Thank you, Ranjit. And let me grab the opportunity to say that I'm really very glad that ISWA and BWasteWise start this partnership. I do believe for many years that the International Solid Waste Association has a lot of great content, but we still have not found the right channels to communicate it worldwide. And part of the problem is what you already mentioned, that still the global community is under formulation. It's not shaped yet. But the other part is that the content is not enough. It's not going out alone. So before I congratulate you for BWasteWise initiative, which I'm very familiar with from the very beginning, I would like to tell you that for us, this is a strategic partnership, and we will do everything possible to strengthen it and open it to more channels as well. And I'm sure that the more we are working together, not only will improve the communication, but the new content will arrive based on the demands of our followers. So I'm very happy that we started this, and I think it's important that we started with a very hot topic, the China ban.
Great. Getting right into it. So, Antonis, what's the status of the Chinese regulations? Has the ban been implemented? And if it is, or if it's not, which waste streams are the most affected and which are not?
Well, I will go in brief because there are many technical details. And I have to thank Swana and David Biderman personally, because he made me aware of all the details very, very soon. I mean, roughly 8 months before now. So what we have now is that from January 1st, the ban is active. Already there are a lot of ships waiting to be controlled, but most of them, they have no hope they will come back. And already we feel the impact. From USA to UK and Australia, the impact in recycling programs is already felt. Sometimes too hard, sometimes smoothly. In Europe, the problem is not that big yet, because you have more lag time and a little bit more local processing capacity. Now, the ban concerns 24 different materials which were broadly imported by China in the previous years. And if you ask me in a glance, I would say that the most important problems will be faced about plastics. Plastics will be mostly affected, and plastic recycling programs worldwide will face several problems, at least temporarily.
That seems straightforward. So, are there? You've discussed these issues in your blog, about the China ban, the ISWA's president's blog, which I think is amazing that you actually keep writing about these important issues there. You've discussed about the China ban there, and a question based on that article is: are there any countries that have increased their recycling in the past 2 decades without relying on China as the easy answer? I know many countries relied on China as the easy answer. So, are there any countries which did without China increased?
Well, from a global perspective, I think we are going to be fair if we say that these were very few. I give you an example. Italy increased a lot its recycling rates, but why? Because it worked a lot with organic fraction. Organic fraction supply chain is the only supply chain that can easily close locally. So the countries that deal a lot with organic fraction, they increase their recycling rates without being dependent on China. There are also some other countries like Philippines and India that increase their recycling rates. But strangely, this happened through the informal sector, because the informal sector recovers pure material that are locally easy to reprocess. So the countries that deal with recycling, let's say in an industrial scale, like Australia, USA, UK, a lot of the European countries, their recycling rates are based a lot on the export to China. I give you an example for Europe. I'm sure David will say a lot about USA. In Europe, half of the plastic we recycle was exported to China. But which plastic was exported? Well, the reality is that in many curbside programs, what we received is a bin with 10, 15, and sometimes 20% impurities. This was not feasible to be locally processed. So it was easier to export it to China. Why? Because Chinese ships are coming to Europe full of commercial products, and when they come back, they want to bring something also. It's not good for them to travel empty. So the easy answer was to take the plastic and give them back. There's a problem here. As ISWA has already said, by 2012, in our report, Global Recycling Markets, Plastic Waste, a Story for One Player, written by Kostas Velis, what we've said is that although we export them and build recycling rates, we knew very well that a lot of them were not actually recycled, but they were burned as a cheap fuel in completely inhuman conditions, creating pollution problems there. So in Europe, we say we increase the recycling rates. in China will really deteriorate the environmental and health impacts.
Great. So generally, in most of our work, we see when it comes to waste management, we see that a lot of people are hurting because of improper waste management worldwide. But this happens to become a problem now in the US and Europe, where we always thought that the waste management systems were properly developed, and clearly they have built systems over the last 20 to 30 years based on this trend with China, and based on providing what's required for China, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and now it's the friends in recycling and different stakeholders in recycling that are hurting in the developed countries. So when you consider the different stakeholders involved in recycling, like cities, citizens, MRFs, and collectors, exporters, etc., who do you think are the winners and losers?
Well, that's a very nice question, and I think we have to be very careful how to judge it. On the one hand, definitely the recycling industry in USA, Europe, and Australia, at least, will face problems, especially the ones who are dealing with plastics, because we are not ready to close the loops locally. And speaking frankly, if there was not the China ban, we will never be able. Exporting to China was the easy question, the easy answer to a very inconvenient question, how to deal with impurities. Now, on the other side, states and waste management authorities might be also winners if they get the right message. And for me, the right message is very, very clear. We have to reprioritize the importance of recycling to our systems. For many years, we have persuaded people that recycling is the best they can do. Now it's obvious that it's not. And the introduction of circular economy and resource management as an integral part in every waste management system gives us the opportunity to push for waste prevention, reuse, and repair, even if it is in the old-fashioned type, to open this discussion. Now, I'm not sure that MRFs will be at the winners, because MRFs are not ready to absorb this capacity. So probably one of the winners will be waste-to-energy plants that are ready to burn this excess of plastics. In some cases, as in USA, I'm pretty sure that there will be a lot of plastics in the landfills, maybe with a special price. And strangely, but it's not a paradox, I think on the global scale, one of the winners will be the informal recyclers. You know why? Because they always recover the purest materials. And these pure materials now probably will have a better price just because there will be fewer in a big excess. Now, there's another problem. There are already some reports. I have in my mind a report from Netherlands. I have in my mind reports from Australia and from Brazil. Also, Brazil was not that much dependent. That the China ban has really dropped down the plastic recyclable prices locally. Because now, when you export half of it to China and now you have everything to be sold in your country, the guys that buy become very, very selective. I think this is the big picture, and I hope that this could be a good opportunity for policymakers to understand that recycling is an imperfect, costly, and very vulnerable solution unless you find closed loops on a local or regional scale.
Right, and we discussed this earlier. You also mentioned that, and I've heard this from various industry experts, that this will be a short-term pain, but it is actually citizens and cities and governments are the winners on the long term because of this ban. So could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, listen, I think that as the International Solid Waste is a global association, it's good to have a global perspective about winners, losers, and cities. Now, let's be frank. China does what it does about the ban, saying that with this, it will protect better the environment and the health in its country, in the country. So it's like saying that importing all these materials the previous year was not done in the best way. We were not able. to manage them in the best way. I know very well that also China now has a big program for environmental protection that is much more general. So part of this program is to wipe out or to reduce substantially the small-scale manufacturers and recyclers in favor of big verticalized chains in China. So this needs to be more professional, more industrial, and this needs better raw materials. Now, it's also part of the problem is that China wants to develop its own domestic recycling programs in its own way. So globally speaking, Chinese will gain from that as citizens, as economy, and environmentally as well. And we cannot blame for them. I mean, sometimes I'm getting pissed off because people say, what China did to us? No. China did to us something that it was a matter of time that it will happen, and we knew about that. Now, let's go to the Western world. What will happen to the Western world is that now we will face the real question. For so many years, we were saying people, recycle and nothing happens. No, it happens. Because when you consume more and more plastics, plastic cups, plastic straws, plastic diapers, whatever is plastic, when you consume so many plastics, it's a fallacy to believe that if you recycle them, the problem is solved. First of all, because not all of them are recycled. We know very well that from the current plastic materials, less than 40 or 30% can be easily recyclable. And second, because even if you recycle everything, so what? You increase consumption and you need more and more plastic. That's the case. So we face now the real problem, how to reduce our dependence on plastic materials. And if we face it, we're going to be winners.
Great. Friends, you're watching the first interview as part of the partnership between ISWA, International Solid Waste Association, and Be Wastewise. And we'll be taking questions in about 13 minutes. And we also have a surprise guest for us. So wait till the very end. Thank you again for joining us. And Antonis, I have to ask you another question. I know you've been talking about the future of waste management quite a bit. I mean, we've been discussing this for a while now. So, and when you say recycling better in your blog article, what do you actually mean by that? And what's the status of robotics and AI infrastructure in recycling better? I'm asking this question because the Western world has developed their systems over the last 3 decades on a single trend, which is China accepting a lot of low quality recyclables. So what role do these new technologies play? What's not just the role, but can you also talk about the status? How much time frame? Can you talk about the time frame for these?
Okay, I think there is a reality which is more complex than sometimes you understand it. The problem is that you guys and me, we are involved in the waste management world deeply. It's our daily life integrating in this. And sometimes we lose the big picture. The big picture is that overall, the global plastic industry is really growing. There are $180 billion investments prepared to be completed before 2025. When we say the global plastic industry, we mean a part of the best emitters of CO2 emissions. We are speaking for an industry completely based on fossil fuels. So forget a little bit what we are going to do. The real problem is that we are going to face more and more quantities of plastics to manage, either as waste or recyclables or resources. Now, what is the status now? The status, as you all know, there are obvious things that we really struggle to recycle. We still have not found a massive solution for plastic cups of coffee. We still have not found a good solution for the hard plastics like the ones we use in our pens. We still don't know what to do with our toothbrushes, just to give some small examples. And we know very well that the problem is even bigger with the composite materials that are plastics, paper, some heavy metals, some paint, like the ones in Amita, or like, I used to speak about the Pringle factor. Pringles are great chips, but the one who created the packaging is a disaster created a disaster. It has aluminum on the bottom, plastic on top, and a very composite paper around. It's best for food protection, but not for not for recycling. So I think one of the major challenges now is to link the designers of the products and the packaging with the waste management world. And ISWA is working on that. We are preparing a common initiative with the Copenhagen School of Design just about that. And we have already delivered 2 products, one about designing jeans and about designing plastic packaging. Now, can we increase the recycling rates in plastics from 25 or 30% that they are now to 60? I'm completely sure that we cannot. Because those plastics that are prepared and consumed now, a lot of them are not recyclable. So the only thing we can do with them is either to dispose them off or burn them or just put them in the landfill. If we want to increase the recycling rates, we have to redesign what is the plastic industry. And this is hard because they are much stronger than recyclers and waste managers.
That's wonderful to know, Antonis, because you're working with the design school, because I just came across news that the Association of Plastic Recycles in the US has also started something similar, working with larger organizations to design their products better. Do you have any final thoughts? We have about 4 minutes before we bring our surprise guest onto the screen.
I just want to say 2 things. First of all, I think we need to understand the broader picture. The broader picture says that maybe in USA there will be a lot of jobs lost due to the less opportunities for recycling, but the big winners will be the plastic industry in USA. I have already written about it, but what we saw is that last year China reduced the imports of plastic scrap by 11% and increased the imports of virgin polyethylene by 9%, if I remember well. It's going to be more. So at the end of the day, the China ban will result in more virgin plastic consumption. And this is the real problem for the world. My second point is that I think we don't have to lose this opportunity. The China ban is an opportunity, first, to reprioritize recycling, as I already said, but also it's an opportunity to think about marine litter on a global scale. Because there is a huge risk that China ban results in more plastics in the sea. And we have proven a lot, and we have discussed, and there is a very great report created by ISWA about marine litter and how it's linked with waste management improvement in each and every country. So let's grab the opportunity. Let's face the China ban as an opportunity to rediscover our waste management systems rather than complaining about it. That's it.
Great, wonderful. So guys, I mean, so we'll be taking questions in another 7 minutes. And I was just thinking, I mean, we've been talking about David and Swana for, Anton has mentioned him twice, and how awesome would it be if he actually just showed up? So we have David Biderman here from the International, so from the Solid Waste Association of North America. David, welcome to Be Waste Wise, and can you unmute yourself? Great, wonderful. Welcome, David.
Good morning.
Great. So thanks for joining us. And US and Canada are 2 of the most impacted countries due to the ban. So can you tell us a little bit about what is the way forward and what is Swana doing?
Sure, I'd be glad to. And first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in this webinar. And Antonis, I think you did a really terrific job providing a global overview and some potential paths forward for the recycling community and the planet. You asked earlier about winners and losers. The biggest loser in the current situation is the planet. We're going to have 9 billion people on planet Earth by 2050, if not more. And waste generation continues to increase at an alarming rate. And that material needs somewhere to go. And if we don't come up with sustainable systems in every country, and in the United States, in the states, and in Canada, in the provinces, we're going to have more plastic in the ocean. We're going to have more illegal dumping, and we're going to have more greenhouse gases. So it's really important that we all come together to work on this issue. The Chinese, I don't particularly like the expression, the China ban. I refer to them as the Chinese waste import restrictions. The reason I do that is there's really three parts to this. So China has banned 24 commodities from coming into their country. Plastic, post-consumer plastic, and mixed paper are the two most important of those for people in the recycling community. And while Antonis focused on plastic, in the United States, since we still recycle such a large amount of paper and only recycle actually a small amount of plastic compared to paper, the biggest impact has been on the mixed paper market. That impact has been primarily in the west coast of the United States, California, Oregon, and Washington. Why there? Because those are the port cities, those are the states within which port cities receive material from China. The commercial goods that Antonis mentioned come into Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, and Portland, and then they go back to China with scrap and recyclable material. And so that was an easy outlet for people in the Western United States to send their recyclables. In fact, a statistic that I've learned over the last few months that is just remarkable is that about 25% of all the exported material that went out of California ports by weight in 2016 was scrap and recyclables. A quarter of the stuff moving out of California ports was scrap and recyclables. So the quantity that we were sending, not just to China, but to some other places, was quite enormous. There's also been an impact in the northeastern United States, in the New England states around Boston, and in eastern Canada, which are also somewhat dependent on exports because there's not a lot of landfill or waste to energy capacity in those parts of the country and those countries, and both of those parts of the United States and Canada have strong recycling cultures. So what we've seen is a lot of stockpiling of material. Bales of plastic and paper are piling up in warehouses outside of MRFs. I've got about 10 pictures on my phone from different people of parking lots that are filled with bales, and people aren't sure what to do with them, but they know the right thing to do isn't to send them to a landfill. And so we've seen this on the West Coast and in Massachusetts in particular for the last few months, and my concern is that the virus is beginning to spread as the import restrictions take effect. So I mentioned the first part of the import restrictions, which is the ban on the 24 materials. The second part of the import restrictions is for things that are not on the list of 24. China will only accept those materials if the contamination rate for them is 0.5% or less. That's an extraordinarily difficult contamination standard for a MRF to satisfy. I know of a very small number of MRFs in the United States and Canada that are being inspected by the Chinese that are apparently satisfying that standard, but it's a very small number. So that's the second piece of the import restrictions. And the third piece is the fact that starting in the third quarter of last year and extending into the first quarter of this year, China has drastically reduced the amount of quota it is issuing to the mills to bring in imports. So there were many millions of tons of import quotas given to various mills. Those numbers have been decreasing by very, very large numbers in percentage terms, 70%, 80%. So much less material is going to China than was going to China a year ago. So what are we doing here in the United States? Well, the industry is trying to attack the contamination problem. China imposed these restrictions in part because it did not want all the crap that people were sending along with the paper and the plastic. And Americans are really good at a lot of things, but we're not very good recyclers. We put the wrong thing in the blue bin. Plastic bags don't belong in curbside recycling. Hoses don't belong in curbside recycling. I've seen bowling balls and ammunition come across the processing lines. We're trying to attack the contamination on the front end with better education. And on the back end, what a lot of the facilities have done is they've slowed down their lines. So they're slowing down the process. They're hiring more people to do quality control and remove contamination. They're actually accelerating their investments in infrastructure, in new systems, new machines, including robotics, to try to make the material that they're producing better. And Antonis mentioned who the winners and the losers are. the biggest winner in the China ban situation are the people who make recycling equipment. Make no mistake about it, that those people are very, very busy right now talking to local governments and private sector recyclers, because there's a lot of interest in either purchasing new equipment, upgrading equipment, etc. I would love to get those people on the phone, but they're too busy selling at the moment. One of the positive results of this is that we're seeing a renewed interest in some things that have not been terribly popular here in North America, particularly in the United States. There's discussion now of the circular economy, which some in the United States think is, this European thing that, we don't need to do. There's more of an interest, and I'm hearing discussion about emphasizing waste reduction, not so much recycling. Because part of the reason we have this problem is we're such prolific waste producers. We generate tens of millions of straws every single day. An example of a single-use product that we use and we throw away, but has to be handled somewhere. There's obviously an increased interest in technology, and I responded to a survey yesterday from one of the leading waste periodicals in the United States, interested in the intersection between technology and China's waste import restrictions. The fourth thing that I'll mention very quickly is we've been doing a great job of what we call chasing tons in the United States. So success in recycling is defined as, well, if we diverted more stuff from landfill or waste to energy, it's successful. Well, we're beginning to rethink whether that's the right metric and right methodology, because it's not that we have a scarcity of landfill space, at least here in the United States. The reason we should be recycling, or one of the principal reasons we should be recycling, relates to climate change. And so maybe we should be refocusing on those elements that if we recycle them and divert them away from a landfill, or not produce them at all, will have a more positive environmental effect. So what's Swana doing? So just yesterday, Swana announced the formation of a new recycling task force. This is a new group within Swana that brings different technical division leadership together, brings people from both the private and the public sector, United States and Canada, and includes several people who are not members of Swana, to come together to discuss what's going on and what we should be doing as a country, and what kind of guidance we can be giving to policymakers and others. One of the problems we have here in the United States is that waste is a locally regulated activity. There's no federal policy out of Washington, D.C. regarding recycling or waste management, other than you have to cover the waste at the landfill at the end of the day. And so as a result, this is a challenge for us in terms of trying to achieve certain goals. We're going to be having conversations with policymakers here in Washington over the next couple of weeks regarding the impact of the waste recycling restrictions on different places in the United States, because as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we're seeing the impact spread from California and the coast inland in places like Arizona and Idaho, and in the southeastern United States to several states and cities there. So we're in the very early stages of developing Swana's response, but we're very concerned about it, and we hope to be able to participate and coordinate with ISWA, Be Wastewise, and others, and vet best practices and solutions to this concern.
Great, thank you very much. That was very useful and enlightening. So I have a question. We're taking questions from, so send us any questions that you have. And the first question that we have is maybe Antonis could respond to this. Laura from Tanzania is asking, will this ban have an impact on Africa, where plastic is mainly sent to landfill or separated by informal collectors? Did African countries already send it to China? That's the question. But I just want to add, I just came back from a World Bank project in Ethiopia, and there in certain cities, I saw that even the high quality plastic, which is generally picked off in any developing country, it was just lying there on the streets because there were no recycling markets in Ethiopia, in cities which were far from Addis Ababa. So could you talk about this, Antonis?
Yes, yes. Well, that's a very good question, because one of the issues that I did not mention is that I don't remember how exactly David told it, the restriction in imports. He's right about the China ban. One of the problems is that this will create global environmental impacts, and the impacts will not be too much, in USA or in Europe. We will find a way to deal with the problem sooner or later. We need time to adjust. But there will be two major environmental impacts that will be global. First, the immediate response of the plastic scrap brokers is to identify alternative markets to China so they can continue the business model they have. And those alternative markets, most of them will be around Southeastern Asia. I'm thinking mainly about Vietnam, Laos, Malaysia, and Thailand. And there are already signs that increasing quantities are driven to these countries, and we really don't know if they are ready to receive them. We really don't know if they're going to follow the Chinese example and burn them for cheap fuel. And I'm pretty sure that there is no local capacity to manage them. Now, I guess this does not concern Africa. If I was living in Africa, I would be more concerned for the possibility to receive plastic scrap that is not accepted, not even in Southeastern Asia, rather than exporting. And this might be a big problem, especially for plastic scrap that contains hazardous materials as well.
Okay, great. David, we have a question for you. This is a question from Mariam. She's asking, can the US and Europe look towards other developing countries such as India, Pakistan, etc., to export plastic waste, or would the focus be more on finding in-house local solutions? Could you talk a little bit about the infrastructure part of the local recycling solutions? We have many questions, so could you wrap it up? But please do talk about the infrastructure part of it. I think that would be really
sure. Just to amplify on what Antonis said, and in response to Mariam's question, there is material now that used to go to China that's going to Southeast Asia and in particular India. There's been some data that I've seen where the amount of material going to India is increasing dramatically, and we have concerns about both whether there is domestic capacity in any of those countries to handle that material, and also at some point in time, some of those countries are going to say, why do we want to be the garbage dump for the EU or the United States? And they'll close the door the same way China did. And so my concern is that these are just temporary Band-Aid solutions. And I'm not aware of much exporting of waste material from Africa to China, although it would not surprise me that in South Africa, both because it's a more developed country than some of the other places, as well as because it has ports and somewhat more proximity, there could be some exports there. We've also seen an interest from the Chinese in potentially developing recycling infrastructure here in the United States. So while the Chinese are reportedly looking at installing waste infrastructure in Vietnam and other countries in Southeast Asia, they're actually bringing a delegation over to the United States next week, and I'll be meeting with them the following week here in Washington to talk about investment opportunities to take plastic, turn it into flake here in the United States, and then ship it to China. So there are some interesting threads and ideas being looked at, and I'm hopeful that this will help to address some of the situation, because we don't have sufficient domestic infrastructure to handle all the plastic in the United States or Canada.
It's interesting how most of the plastic packaging is designed in companies here in the US, and you know, it's an interesting part to we could maybe delve into at a different time. But we have one more question. We actually have a bunch of questions, but this question is from Andrea. She's asking, Antonis, this question is for you. So she's asking, why does the EU circular economy package and the new EU plastic strategy does not focus more on waste reduction or minimization? Are you aware of these two? Can you talk about them?
Yeah. Well, I think that we have to be very frank. What's happening with the EU plastic strategy is similar to what's happening with the circular economy in general. What's the problem here? The problem is that we say wonderful things for circular economy as a concept. We are trying to develop it to more specific and tangible projects. But at the end of the day, what's happening is that the only industrial sector that has to face specific obligations about circular economy is the recycling and waste management industry, and all the other industries are left to follow on a voluntary basis. Well, we have to say the truth. It's not enough to be ambitious for the waste management and recycling industry, because our industry, at the end of the day, will receive the leftovers of all the other manufacturers. If circular economy packages do not involve the other manufacturers with specific targets, with obligations, with incentives to change, then we will not be able to receive that. And as a comment, the EU plastic strategy is very ambitious. This is good. I would prefer for it to be also more practical about the manufacturers. But this is a general problem because our industry is the weakest one comparing to other industrial sectors. So at the end of the day, it's easier to impose targets and obligations on us rather than the plastic industry.
Great. Thank you, Antonis. We have another question from Guna. And Guna is asking, will the ban impact the textile waste recycling? Is there much data on this? David, can you take this?
Sure. So there's a number of categories of banned materials on the list of China's 24 items that are textiles. And so there is some quantity of textile waste that was being sent over to China that is no longer permitted to be sent there. I will tell you, I don't have any data on the quantity of that because it's probably infinitesimally small compared to paper and plastic. Much of the textiles that are generated in the United States for diversion end up actually going to Africa. But I would be glad to do a little bit of research and try to find some information on that, because that's the third piece after paper and plastic that there should be some impact. But right now we're really focusing on the paper and the plastic.
Okay, great, wonderful. Antonis, so friends, we only have 3 more minutes to end this session. So if you have any other questions or comments, send us to them at connect@wastewise.be, and we'll try to get them answered. Thank you again for joining us. And you know, this is the beginning of the partnership between ISWA and Be Wastewise. We have 5 more events coming up this year. So if you want to, you know, be updated, please follow ISWA on social media or sign up to their newsletter. You could also do the same thing with Be Wastewise. Go to our website, follow and subscribe to our newsletter. And before we end, before I ask the final comments from both David and Antonis, there is a quick question to you from Ben. Will this import restrictions, will this China ban, will this kind of action lead to other countries becoming more insular? Is the idea of a waste Schengen in the EU feasible?
Well, that's a very, very, very difficult question and a very hot debate. Now, a few years ago, the discussion about a European Union Schengen zone about waste was hotter than it is today. But this is not only about water. The European unity was hotter a few years ago than it is today in politics as well. I think that the China ban, especially for Europeans, means 2 particular things. First, the European plastic industry should change itself and it is able to receive more materials, more pure materials. So Europeans have to stop thinking about recycling everything in one bin. They have to develop single stream plastic recycling. And this will help a lot to find solutions. Second, I don't believe that the China ban drives against globalization. Globalization will go on, and there will be other outlets as well. Of course, no outlet can substitute the giant, because China was a giant receiving everything. So I would say that the China ban will help us to rebalance between globalization and the necessity to develop local loops. And the same push to rebalance can be also done by the fourth industrial revolution, new technologies. Personally, I believe that one of the best hopes to resolve the waste, the plastic recycling problem, is the evolution of 3D printers. And I'm very happy because I know there are already experiments in place to recycle a lot of different materials, plastic materials, using 3D printers and producing new products.
All right, Antonis, could you also have any closing remarks, less than a minute?
I just have one closing remark. I believe that we are going more and more faster towards a very serious crisis about the role of plastics in our lives. The situation we are living with marine litter, with the introduction of plastics and microplastics in the marine, in the food chain, will oblige us sooner or later to identify alternatives. So the situation is like it was in 1890 in New York and London about the horse manure crisis. These two cities back then, they were trying to find an alternative to horse manure, but they couldn't because horse was so central to the daily lives for everything. The solution to this problem did not come from the engineers that were involved with the problem or by the architects and the urban planners. It came by Henry Ford by the introduction of cars. Now, I'm optimistic that we will find such an alternative for plastics as well, but I hope we will find it soon before our food chain become too polluted. And even if we find it, if we found that solution, we have to remember that 100 years after Henry Ford put the car in our lives, now we face a lot of problems from the air exhaustion of cars. So we will still have a lot of work to do. Thank you.
No, I think that's actually very optimistic because if we solve all the problems now, I mean, what will be the purpose of future generations? I mean, they'll become really lost without a purpose. David, do you have any final comments, final remarks? Less than 1 minute, please.
Sure. Earlier this week, there was an event in the United States called the Global Waste Management Symposium, which occurs every 2 years. And one of the speakers there works for Leonardo DiCaprio's foundation. And he said something that I thought was just remarkable. He said that the biggest opportunity, the biggest economic opportunity in the history of our planet is financing a zero waste environment. And I think we have to look at that in the context of the China conversation. And we should recognize that it's a very big, heavy lift. It's a big challenge. But I do think that between technology, innovation, and changing people's behavior, I think we'll be able to develop a more sustainable system for recycling, both here in North America as well as throughout the world. This is a central focus for Swana. I did not know last year that I was going to become an expert on international trade policy, and I'm not really an expert, but I know enough about it to be dangerous now. We're going to be continuing to work on this issue. Next month at one of our national events, we're bringing in somebody from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Waste Management, and several local government officials to do a keynote session at our event in Denver. And although we haven't yet formally announced WasteCon in later 2018 in Nashville, Tennessee, one of the central themes is going to be global and international issues. And we look forward to partnering with Antonis, Be Wastewise, and others to bring expertise and knowledge to this and other issues for the benefit of all attendees. And again, I want to thank you for inviting me to participate in this webinar today.
No, great. Thank you very much, guys, Antonis and David, for joining us. Friends, you can go to swana.org, swana.org. You can go to iswa.org, iswa.org, and wastewise.be, wastewise.be, just as it sounds. So you can go there, you can find a lot of information. Swana has a... Sorry about that. Swana has a upcoming event, Swanapalooza. Attend that, and it also has numerous local events. Be part of the local communities, and so that you can stay updated. Same with ISWA. It has a conference coming up, a global conference, and it has numerous local events. And Be Wastewise itself is doing numerous online events. Tomorrow we'll be interviewing Adam Reed. He's one of the most respected professionals in the industry. And he'll be talking a little bit about the China ban, its impacts on Europe, but he'll also be talking about the trends, other trends, and his life, his work. So join us tomorrow with Adam Reed. And with that, thank you very much. Stay updated. All right, bye. Thank you.
Thank you.